entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
This week's discussion of the week topic comes courtesy of a debate that was held in my very first live stream back following my 2-year hiatus from YouTube. Now, the question that was posted in this debate was as follows. What does the ethnical and cultural identity of a character matter as opposed to the ethical merits of said character? So essentially, why would representation matter to begin with? Let's talk about that. Now, this video will be a follow-up to my recent Black Panther movie review, and funny enough, it was that film that sparked this debate in the first place. In the live stream that I mentioned at the start of this video, I was giving my brief overall thoughts on Black Panther, and I discussed that the biggest takeaway from that film for me was the fact that that film presented a positive portrayal of a black male lead character and how significant that was for that film to garner the accolades that it did, the critical reception, and the financial success. I thought that that was very paramount. Now, of course, at this point, this is where the counter argument was presented. And the counter argument was simply that, Larry, isn't the most important thing the fact that Black Panther himself got that type of exposure, right? The things that that character represents, what that character stands for, the ideas and the symbolism that goes into that entity, isn't that the most important thing? And I understand that counter argument because quite often that is the same argument that's applied to, say, Superman, for an example. You know, when you take an iconic character, say, call it Superman, call it Batman, call it Spider-Man, hell, even Spider-Man Into the Spideyverse, which I just recently saw for the first time, that question comes up in that film. You know, the whole notion of it doesn't really matter who wears the mask. Like anyone can wear the mask, right? Because that notion, what that notion does is it is building off of this idea, inferring this message that it is the mantle that matters. It is what that character represents that matters. So whoever's behind the mask doesn't matter so much as it is that character, right? I get all of that. And to some degree, I do agree with that. Here's my retort though. Specifically with Black Panther, the reason why that mattered, okay, it is personal. It's personal, and I have a greater interest for that film to perform the way it did than, say, Man of Steel or something like that. And the reason for it is quite simple. Let's be honest about this. There is a shortage of positive portrayals of black men, especially African American men, in mainstream media and especially within geek media and geek culture. Make a list of all the portrayals, especially lead portrayals for African American men or just black men in general. Make 2 lists: negative portrayals, positive portrayals, and I guarantee you the negative portrayal will be a much longer list. The point I'm arguing is not that we don't have positive portrayals. The point I'm arguing is those positive portrayals are scarce and there aren't many of them, most of which I have already seen. So when I went to the theater to see Black Panther, and of course, we all saw, the pictures on social media. I mean, even the mainstream news circuits caught on to it and started, releasing articles and stories about it. But to see, the school bus full of kids taking field trips to go see Black Panther, to see the kids dressed up in the costumes and their parents dressed up too, just to see other African Americans, even the adults, to dress up in, in African wear and makeup and whatnot. Like, that was a big deal. It was almost analogous to a hometown going to see the season opener for their local team. That we were going to celebrate our team. a film starring, a black cast, written by black men, directed by a black man. And say what you want to will about the intentions of Marvel Studios and the Walt Disney Corporation. That's not the point of this discussion. The point is, we don't get a lot of those. We don't get a lot of those, and there's never been one on this scale. I'm talking about in terms of a budget. I'm talking about in terms of marketing. I'm talking about in terms of a worldwide reach. I'm talking about in terms of revenue. I'm talking about in terms of awards. This is not the norm, okay? So for Black Panther's release, yes, it set a precedent, and I think it's important. The reason why I think that is important is because for a lot of the people who went and saw the film, it was something they had never seen before. It was something they never seen before. It was something they were not accustomed to. 1.78 billion changes a lot of minds, so we might see more entertainment in this light. But by and large, this was a lot of people's first exposure to the Afrofuturism genre, which, unless you were already familiar with that material beforehand, chances are you never even heard of that as a subgenre. Afrofuturism, Afrofantasy, you never even heard of that subgenre, right? So that's what I'm talking about. There is an inherent scarcity, okay? And so for people to be able to engage in entertainment in that light, that mattered. Also, self-perception, self-identity. Those things matter, because let's be honest about this too. For a lot of African American boys and for a lot of African American young men, unfortunately, the entertainment outlets are the only influence that a lot of these individuals have in terms of conceiving an idea of self-perception, of what it means to be an African American man, of what that looks like, what that sounds like. Let's just be honest about this. Because of the state of that community, there are a lot of boys and young African American men. Who do they look up to? You have your rappers, you have your movie stars, of course, athletes. That's probably the biggest. You have all these examples, but a lot of these cats don't have dads. And that's just the truth. That's just the truth. And I'm not knocking anybody. I'm not shaming anybody. I'm just stating what is a fact. A lot of them don't. And it's unfortunate. And I feel for them. A lot of them don't. A lot of them don't have grandfathers. They don't have uncles. And then even if they have older brothers, a lot of times, once older brother is old enough to get out of the house, he's off and he's doing his own thing. He might not look back for his younger brothers. That just happens, okay? And there are multiple reasons for that. Societal conventions, we got discrimination, the incarceration rate, all of those things. I won't get into much detail about those. We know the mechanisms and the mechanics that causes that phenomenon in the first place. We know they exist and they're real. Now, you would think to yourself, though, for all of these real world, hard hitting issues, like what the hell does that have to do with a superhero film, Larry? Like what does that even matter? I have always, ever since I ever started this channel, I have always advocated the message that the things that we engage in, the entertainment we engage in, the media we choose, it is not superfluous. It does matter. Whether you know that it matters, it does matter. It means something. This is what art is. This is how art communicates, okay? And it resonates with people. And so the same way how, like, when I was a kid and I remember seeing the Justice League animated series for the first time, and the fact that Green Lantern was a black man, and I was like, whoa, who is that? That threw me through a loop because I had never seen it before. You know what I mean? And then, of course, I wanted to know all about it. John Stewart, the Green Lantern. I was like, oh man, I never heard of this guy before. Same thing happened with Blade, even though I wasn't allowed to see that movie until much later. But then even like in Spider-Man, the animated series, seeing Blade pop up, I'm like, whoa, who is this guy? Because it's a black guy. I'm like, oh, a black superhero, I've never seen that before. And then you really want to trip my head up when I first discovered Dwayne McDuffie and his work. And when I learned how pivotal he was to the production of the Justice League animated series, he wrote the majority of that series. And I was like, oh snap, this is a black comic book creator. And then Static, and then Milestone. And because I was not exposed to these things, right? I did not know this existed. Why? Because the social norm is your superheroes are white. Your superheroes are men. Your superheroes are this, that, and the third, and there is a scarcity in these characters that look like you, and that come from where you come from, and that represent your community. And the same thing goes for the African American community. It goes for the Hispanic community. It goes with the Asian community. Though with the Asian community, though, you know what's funny about this? The Asian community, they experience the same stereotypes in Hollywood. They experience the same type of racial discrimination in terms of actors and actresses being able to get roles and be able to get work. I mean, just go back and look at Bruce Lee's story. It's all in there. The funny thing about it, though, is they always knew how to support their community. To use Bruce Lee as an example, in the States, Bruce Lee was just a sidekick when he played Kato on the Green Hornet. But then he went back to China, and then lo and behold, it's like, dude, we don't call that the Green Hornet. It's called the Kato Show. And his fan base in China was massive. And notice, Bruce went back to Hong Kong, he went back to China, he became a movie superstar over there, and then the West came knocking again. It's like, we want you to do Enter the Dragon. And then once he did that film, worldwide phenomenon, right? Like I said, that's the funny thing about the Asian community, because they always knew how to support their people. They always knew how to support their people. They created their own film industry. That's why we have the anime and manga industry that came out of that. Like they always knew how to support their creators, support their talent, because they understood why representation matters. And I will also go to say that even in America, within the African American community, same thing. We understood that. That's why Motown happened. Berry Gordy and all of the productions he did, Quincy Jones and everything he did, like, we knew that. And that's when we started creating our own content. But even still, there was always that glass ceiling. And whether or not people want to acknowledge it, the glass ceiling does exist. It's something that is real, okay? It existed in Hollywood. It existed in mainstream entertainment for a very long time. And we are just now starting to breach those borders, to breach those barriers. And, and the same thing in the Hispanic community. Oh my goodness, man. You want to talk about support within the community. There is a huge difference between an American luchador production and an authentic Mexican luchador wrestling promotion. Two completely different things. If you've ever seen any of those, they're massive. The people show up in drones. They're wearing the masks. They got the t-shirts. They got the banners, the posters, the flyers. It's huge. So why is representation important? Why does representation matter? Because at the end of the day, the biggest achievement that any work of art can ever make, can ever accomplish, it's not just presenting the work, and it's not just being able to relay your message. It's being able to resonate with the people that, number one, the work was intended for, number two, patrons who actually pay for it, but then number three, for a work of art to stand paramount within the culture in which it was created, the society in which it was intended for, and the period of time in which it was created. All of those things, that is what makes a work of art timeless. And part of that has to do with the audience's ability to see themselves reflected in that work. The Greco-Roman classics, okay? All of the statues, all of the epics, all of the mythology, everything that came from the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, those things would not still exist, and they certainly wouldn't be as prevalent if Western Europeans didn't incorporate all of that into their cultural canon. And if they did not consider that part of their origin story. That goes into the whole notion of myth building and myth creating. I mean, hell, that's what the Aeneid was, right? The Aeneid was a Roman propaganda piece that was supposed to rewrite the origin of the Roman people by tracing it back to the fall of Troy following the Iliad. All right, total propaganda piece. We already know that. All right, but that proves my point. Why? Because the Romans wanted to be able to identify themselves with a people, with a culture, with a society, with works that they felt encompassed their values. And it mattered to them because they wanted to be able to see themselves in those legends, okay? That's where that comes from. And that's the reason why so many of the myths of nation building, that's why we have those. That's why we have all of that propaganda that went behind the American Revolution. That's why Beowulf is such a world-renowned epic. That's why the Viking myths, even in 2019, Norse mythology and some of the Viking myths are so prevalent, not just in Scandinavia and in Norway, but around the world, because people want to be able to see themselves reflected in their modern mythology. Black Panther did that, and it's important. Black Panther did that because it's important for the African American community. It's very important for African American men. Why? Because now they have seen themselves portrayed on the big screen, and they have seen themselves portrayed as something other than a drug dealer, a criminal, a murderer, a crook. They saw themselves portrayed as a king, as a fucking king. Look around. How many of those portrayals do you see in the African American community? We can't even get a film about ancient Egypt without it being whitewashed. How many white pharaohs are there in Hollywood? Let's be real about it. How many white Moseses are there? How many white Jesus? You know what? I'm not even going to touch Jesus, okay? But you get my point. So when you go ahead and you tell me that the character himself is what is more paramount than the people that character represents, I understand the point you're trying to make, but that you cannot ignore the significance of what that person means to that people. That's going to go ahead and wrap up this week's Discussion of the Week video. I want to thank you all for joining me again this week, and please, in the comments below, leave your thoughts on this topic. Let's kick off the conversation. Let's get the discourse going. And I'm curious, I want to know, what are some of your favorite characters, especially ones from your own background and your own community? I would love to be able to hear some of those responses, because let's be real about this. OAW Entertainment, we global, baby. We got a fan base, a patronage across the world. So I would love to hear from some of my people over in the UK, from some of my people over down in Australia, from some of my people over in Asia, some of my people over in the motherland. Whatever mythology you want to tap into, please feel free, share those in the comments below. If you like this video, please feel free, thumb it up, share it with anyone you think would get a kick out of this. And do not forget, if you have yet to do so, feel free to subscribe to the OAW YouTube channel. And with that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Editor-in-Chief. I'm signing off, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.